The first thing you hear is the snap. It isn't the sharp, clean crack of a dry twig snapping underfoot in a forest. It is a wet, muffled, and deeply resonant thud, like a heavy oak branch breaking inside a thick sack of raw, unaged meat. It is the sound of your daughter's 4 smaller toes being crushed downward with systematic, maternal force. You are tucking them under the sole of her foot, forcing the bone to yield to the will of tradition. The air in the small, silk-draped room is sickeningly sweet, a cloying atmosphere that sticks to the back of your throat. It's a mixture of expensive jasmine incense burning in a corner brazier and a faint, underlying, metallic stench of stagnant blood mixed with rice vinegar. You are the mother. Your own hands, once broken and folded in this exact same way by your own mother, are now the cold instruments of this mercy. You aren't acting out of hate. You are acting out of a terrifying, culturally mandated love. You feel the heat of her skin, a feverish, angry, radiating warmth against your palms as you pull the wet silk bandages tighter. The girl is 6 years old. She isn't screaming anymore. She has moved beyond the capacity for vocalizing pain into a rhythmic, low whimpering that sounds like a wounded animal caught in a trap it doesn't understand. Her chest heaves in short, shallow bursts, her small lungs struggling to find oxygen in the smoke-filled room. As you pull the wet binding, the arch of her foot buckles. You feel the tarsal bones splinter and rearrange themselves under your thumbs. The goal is precise: to turn the functional, biological foot of a human being into a 3-inch crescent moon, a golden lotus. You aren't just shaping flesh. You are sculpting her entire future, her marriageability, and her very right to exist in the upper echelons of society. In the twilight of the Qing dynasty, a woman with natural, functional feet is a peasant, a beast of burden destined for the mud. A woman with broken feet is a trophy, a symbol of a family so wealthy they can afford a daughter who cannot walk. As you cinch the last knot, a single drop of dark, deoxygenated blood seeps through the pristine white silk. This is the sound of beauty. It is the sound of a girl being systematically crippled so she can become a queen. If you can hear that snap and feel that wet vibration without flinching, then look closer. We are about to descend into the most aesthetic, gold-plated torture chamber in human history. This is the ritual of the lotus, and once the bandages are on, there is no turning back. Welcome to the year 1890. In the high-walled compounds of the Chinese elite, the system is a cage made of the finest silk and the most rigid traditions. Foot binding is not an act of spontaneous madness. It is a cold, calculated, and deeply entrenched economic strategy. This is the ritual of the lotus, a practice that has endured for 1,000 years because it serves a specific, brutal purpose. A girl's feet are her dowry, her social security, and her permanent prison. The logic of the era is as sharp as a razor. A woman who cannot walk cannot stray. She is a permanent resident of the inner chambers, a sedentary ornament whose very helplessness is the ultimate testament to her husband's power and wealth. If a man can afford a wife who must be physically carried from her bed to her sedan chair, he is a man of ultimate status. The foot is reduced to a fetishized object, a secret to be hidden within embroidered silk shoes that are smaller than a modern smartphone. But look closer at the golden lotus. Beyond the embroidery and the silk, it is a biological disaster. To achieve the perfect 3-inch length, the golden standard, the foot must be folded until the heel and the ball of the foot nearly touch. This creates a deep, permanent cleft in the center of the sole, a dark, humid trench where the skin is folded in on itself. It is a place where the sun never shines and where the air never circulates. If you have the stomach to watch this ritual unfold to its necrotic, bone-deep conclusion, hit the like button now. It is the toll for entering the Forbidden City's shadow. Only the brave survive the crushing weight of 10 centuries of tradition. The history books want to talk about the beauty of the shoes. I am here to talk about the rot inside them. The mother is the algos, the executioner in this scenario, but she is also the ultimate victim of the cycle. She knows with a cold, piercing clarity that if she shows false kindness, if she binds the feet too, loosely or stops when the girl cries her daughter will grow up with large feet. In 1890, this is a death sentence for a girl's social life. She will be a laughingstock, a social pariah. She will be forced to marry a common laborer. She will work in the rice fields until her back breaks and her skin turns to leather under the sun. To save the girl's life, the mother must destroy her feet. This is the Koringa of Chinese history, the ultimate head fake where maternal love manifests as the systematic, intentional crushing of her own child's skeletal structure. Let's walk through the procedure step by step. This isn't a single event. It is a ritual that takes years of constant, agonizing maintenance. However, the first few months are a descent into a living morgue. This is where the biological reality of the Lotus is stripped of its romanticism. First comes the preparation of the flesh. The feet are not bound dry. They are soaked in a warm, steaming mixture of medicinal herbs and animal blood, usually goat's blood. The goal is simple: to soften the skin and make the bone more pliable, less likely to shatter into unusable fragments, and more likely to bend. The toenails are then clipped back until they bleed. This is done to prevent them from growing into the flesh later, as the toes are forced into the sole. But they won't grow. Not in the way nature intended. Now the breaking. This is the moment that defines the girl's life. You take the 4 smaller toes and force them downward, snapping the metatarsal bones. You don't do it with a surgical tool. You do it with the weight of your entire body, pressing your palms into the girl's foot until you feel the resistance give way. The girl's scream is a high, piercing note that seems to vibrate the very rice paper windows of the room. You don't stop. You cannot stop. You take long strips of white silk, soaked in the same herbal blood bath, and begin to wrap. As the silk dries in the stagnant air, it shrinks. It becomes a vice, tightening its grip on the broken bones, forcing them to knit together in a deformed vertical stack. Every 2 days, the renewal occurs. This is the moment of peak visceral horror. When the silk bandages are removed, the smell hits you like a physical blow to the stomach. It is the scent of necrosis. Because the blood flow to the extremities has been restricted and the toes are pressed into a dark, anaerobic environment, the flesh begins to die. In many successful cases, the toes actually begin to rot away. Do not look away. In the twisted logic of 1890, this is considered a success. Smaller feet are easier to bind if the excess flesh has simply rotted off the bone. Look at the deep cleft that has formed under the foot. You must take a long, thin bamboo sliver and scrape out the dead skin, the sweat, and the fungal growth that accumulates in that dark, airless fold. If you don't perform this cleaning with brutal regularity, the infection will turn into wet gangrene, and the girl will lose her entire leg or her life. The mother smells the sweetness of the rot. In the flowery poetry of the era, the men called this fragrant, but in the reality of the anatomy, it is the smell of putrefaction. It is the scent of a human body being forced to decompose while it is still alive. But the girl isn't allowed to rest. After the rebinding, she is forced to walk. This is called walking the bindings. You make her pace back and forth across the room on her broken, bleeding stumps. Why? Because you need her own body weight to act as a secondary hammer, further crushing the bones into the desired shape. Each step is a fresh fracture. Each step forces the arch of the foot to collapse further upward, creating that coveted moon shape. Her gait becomes a tiny, fluttering, unstable shuffle, the Lotus gait. This walking style causes her leg muscles and buttocks to atrophy and tighten in a specific way, creating a physical silhouette that the men of the 1890s found highly erotic. This is the ritual prohibido. It is the total, irreversible transformation of a human being into a curated piece of furniture. If you want to see the secrets the silk tries to hide, if you want to understand the true cost of history, subscribe now. I am peeling back the bandages of the past, and the bare bone is visible beneath. Don't let the beauty of the shoes fool you. The price was paid in blood and rot. The system of the lotus foot has a hidden systemic price that the silk shoes can never fully cover. This wasn't just a localized injury. It was a permanent systemic poison. Because the woman could no longer walk with any degree of efficiency, her entire circulatory system was decimated. Her heart, a muscle designed for a body in motion, had to work twice as hard to pump blood into the mangled, compressed, and oxygen-starved tissue of her lower extremities. Over the decades, this led to chronic systemic cardiovascular strain. Then, there is the matter of the invisible executioner, the chronic infection. The deep cleft in the sole of the foot was a permanent, warm, and moist home for bacteria. If a woman became too ill to clean her own feet, or if she was neglected by her servants in her old age, the golden lotus became a direct gateway for septicemia. Imagine a noblewoman in a palace of jade and gold. She is the envy of her peers, wearing shoes no larger than a child's toy. But inside those shoes, her feet are a battlefield of weeping sores, fused bones, and necrotic tissue. A simple scratch from an ingrown nail or a splinter from a wooden floorboard could send a lethal wave of bacteria through her weakened lymphatic system. In our modern world, we look at a Ryo-X of a bound foot and we see a catastrophic car crash. We see a skeleton that has been folded like origami, the bones fused into a solid, useless lump of calcium. But to the observer in 1890, that Ryo-X, had it existed, would have been a map of supreme virtue. The more deformed the bone, the more pure the woman was considered to be. Her value was inversely proportional to her ability to stand on her own 2 feet. A betrayal of this practice was total. The society told the woman she was being elevated to the status of a living goddess, an ethereal being too pure to touch the earth. But biologically, she was being reduced to a cripple who would suffer chronic, excruciating, and pulsating pain for every remaining second of her life. She could not run from a fire. She could not walk to see a sunset. She was a permanent prisoner of her own beauty, held captive by the very bones that were supposed to support her. The ultimate head fake of the Lotus tradition came at the very end of these women's lives. These women, who were pampered, carried, and worshipped for their tiny feet, often died from the very sedentary lifestyle that their feet demanded. The total lack of movement led to blood clots, deep vein thrombosis. A clot would form in the stagnant, sluggish pools of blood in her lower legs, break loose, and travel through her veins until it lodged in her lungs. She would die of a lotus embolism, her final breath snatched away by the very tradition she had spent her entire life perfecting. She was killed by her own status. The practice of foot binding was so deeply woven into the fabric of Chinese identity that it wasn't fully eradicated until the middle of the 20th century. The last generation of Lotus women died only a few decades ago, carrying the sound of beauty in their shattered bones until the very day they were lowered into the earth. We look at the tiny, ornate shoes in museums today, and we feel a comfortable sense of distant pity. We tell ourselves that we have moved past such primitive barbarism. But are we truly different? Or have we just changed the tools? We still manipulate the human form to satisfy the gaze of the system. We still endure the snap of the plastic surgeon's needle, the crush of the modern corset, or the rot of extreme diet culture. They are all just modern versions of the silk bandage, different ways to break the body to fit a mold. A golden lotus is not a historical curiosity. It is a mirror. It shows us that there is absolutely no limit to what the human mind can convince the human body to endure in the desperate name of belonging. It proves that we would rather be broken and beautiful than whole and ignored. Next time you see a Ryo-X of a bound foot or a pair of those impossibly small shoes, don't just see a deformity. Hear the sound of the snap. See the mother with the pliers of tradition. See the father counting the dowry. And hear the ghost of a 6-year-old girl walking across a dark room in 1890, her broken bones clicking against each other like dice in a cup. Would you have had the terrifying strength to break your own child's bones to save her from a life of destitution? Or would you have let her keep her feet and watched her starve on the fringes of society? The history of the Lotus is the history of a choice that no human being should ever have to make. Yet millions of mothers made it every day for 1,000 years. The silk is still wet with the vinegar. The jasmine is still burning. Leave your answer in the comments below. Would you choose the agonizing pain of the elite or the functional life of the peasant? The archivista is watching the gates of the palace, and the bandages are waiting for the next generation. Don't look away. The snap is just the beginning.